Gil had been an advisor in Eduardo Bolsonaro's office in the Chamber of Deputies, and in this conversation, the existence of the safe with the money from the kickback scheme was revealed. We have a clip from that conversation. We've selected it. Let's listen.
He told us to put it together. Take a little from the salary to build up some savings, which at that time didn't even have the name Rachadinha, okay? Then you said, I'll never forget exactly. That was even Nordinho's accent, you said. Exactly, that's what we have to do. Because, look, I'm telling you, Duda had 2 people in the office who got their full salary and gave half of it back. And we had a safe in the office where we took that half and put it in that safe, and it added up to 250,000 reais in the safe. And one fine day, Duda showed up there. She took those 250,000 to use as a down payment on an apartment. And when the campaign came, we didn't even have 5,000 reais to pay a campaign bill. So we really have to do this. And then she suggested and said, look, it's better not to mess with anyone's salary. Do it like this, return the GEDs, because we have 2.5 GEDs, and if you're a leader, you'll have a little more GED. So people don't mess with the salary, right? She gave that suggestion. And the GEDs are incorporated into the salary, and they return the GEDs, which would be a kickback, right? That's the kickback scheme involving the GEDs.
We're not discussing here the major corruption that happened and was investigated by Operation Car Wash. That's not up for discussion. But what is being discussed is that you don't fight irregularities by committing irregularities. That the ends do not justify the means. And that's the effort that as judges we can make. And we must do it. Therefore, that's what's up for debate. And I believe that's what ran through all the commendable votes of my fellow councillors who spoke before me. Before taking over the presidency of the Supreme Federal Court, I had, so to speak, knowledge of this matter from the outside. That knowledge that all of us had from looking at it from the outside, I knew the inner workings of the operation. I knew what had reached the Supreme Court for judgment, but obviously I hadn't delved into it as I have now from the inside into what was investigated within the scope of this case. I emphasize finally that in my view from the study I did of the case files that the extraordinary inspection carried out by the National Justice Inspectorate already in the year 2023 did not identify, in my opinion, any other substantial indication of functional misconduct attributable to the judge. This circumstance reinforces the isolated nature of the conduct currently under examination. For this reason, in light of the principle of proportionality, which I believe should govern the determination of sanctions, I agree with the rapporteur regarding the characterization of official misconduct warranting punishment, but I disagree regarding the penalty. To join the dissent raised by Councillor Jato Dantas, to impose disciplinary leave for 1 year. That is how I vote and proclaim the result of the judgment, not without first congratulating the distinguished lawyer who, as Councillor Silva Amorim said a moment ago, remains firm. After the clear oral argument you made from this podium, honoring the legal profession, please accept our congratulations. Likewise, Mr. Deputy Attorney General, for the argument presented. I hereby announce the result of the judgment in the Administrative Disciplinary Proceeding 341,141. The Council has unanimously decided to extend the deadline for the conclusion of the Administrative Disciplinary Proceeding by 140 days starting from May 15, 2026. 2. By majority, to reject the preliminary objection based on the statute of limitations, with Councillor Paulo Regis Machado Botelho dissenting, who considered that the statute of limitations had run. 3. Unanimously to reject the other preliminary objections. 4. Unanimously to grant the request and impose the penalty of removal from duty with proportional pay. 6. By majority to set the period of the penalty of removal from duty at 2 years according to the rapporteur's vote. 7. The dissenting votes were from Councillors Jato Dantas, Paulo Regis Machado Botelho, Fabio Esteves, and the President, who set the penalty of removal from duty at 1 year. That is 1 year. This is the result of the judgment, and this is the proclamation.
The National Council of Justice is hearing the case this afternoon, and now a majority has been formed, so there are already enough votes to determine a punishment for the judge who replaced Sergio Moro in Operation Car Wash. Her specific case concerns the creation, let's remember, of that Lava Jato Foundation. After Lava Jato identified, that is, the losses to public funds for Petrobras due to the embezzlement of public money, the Petrobras made an agreement with the United States government to reimburse, to compensate the agents, the shareholders of Petrobras who had suffered losses. And Lava Jato decided to take part of that money to create a foundation that would be focused on anti-corruption actions. This was an idea from the Lava Jato task force in the public prosecutor's office, and Gabriela Hart signed a commitment agreement that would make possible the formation, the creation of this foundation, which was already blocked back then by the Supreme Federal Court, based on the understanding that it would be a private foundation to manage the reimbursement of public money, which would be an institutional arrangement that does not exist in Brazil. After this decision by the Supreme Federal Court against the creation of the foundation, an investigation was started before the National Justice Council to verify what Lava Jato wanted to do with this money, which should be public and would go to a private foundation. This is the view that prevailed. In the National Justice Council, she, for having been the judge who approved the agreement that would enable the formation of this institution, should be punished. The majority is already in favor of punishment. One group argues that she should be suspended from her position for 2 years. Another group argues that the suspension should be for 1 year. The trial is still ongoing. It has not been concluded. Therefore, there is still no exact decision on what the punishment will be. But there is already a majority for her to receive such a penalty for the approval of this agreement. Another point that caught the CNJ's attention was the speed with which she approved this agreement. And also, according to the accusation before the National Justice Council, she negotiated with the public prosecutor's office even before the signing, even before receiving the proposal to create this private foundation through a WhatsApp conversation. She allegedly arranged how this setup would work, which does not exist in the Brazilian legal system. This was the argument that prevailed in the National Justice Council up to this point. There is already a majority to impose this punishment on Gabriela Harding, who replaced Sergio Moro as head of Operation Car Wash when the former judge left the operation to take over the Ministry of Justice at the beginning of Jair Bolsonaro's government. Therefore, another setback for Operation Car Wash now with this punishment for Gabriela Harding. Besides her, there are 3 other appellate judges who are expected to be judged next by the National Justice Council, as they are also accused. In this case, not related to the foundation, but for repeated non-compliance with decisions made by the Federal Supreme Court. Decisions made in the first instance were overturned by the Supreme Court, but eventually, in the second instance, the appellate judges, instead of following the Supreme Court's understanding, followed the first instance's understanding. This is another stage that we should also have in the coming weeks of judgment at the National Justice Council, which could lead to the punishment of other members, other judges who were directly linked to Operation Car Wash. Just to give some context, the CNJ, which is the National Justice Council, is the body that regulates the guidelines for the work of judges throughout Brazil. And it is also responsible for analyzing disciplinary administrative proceedings, that is, to check whether a judge has committed any administrative infraction in the course of their duties as a magistrate. And in the CNJ's view, yes, Gabriela Harding should be punished. Now, it still remains to be decided whether it should be removal for 1 or 2 years, but the majority already favors that she be kept away and not serve as a judge for at least a year. Deborah Yuri.